The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is one of the most classic entries in the Zelda series. With its one-year development period to its controversial remake, there's a lot to be said about this game, and a lot you couldn't have missed. After we enter the Southern Swamp, save a boat lady, and learn of a monkey's plight, we make it to the Woodfall Temple and its surrounding bog. With its Deku-centric gameplay and Mayan aesthetic, I'm going to show you what you couldn't have missed. As we enter the Woodfall Temple, despite the poison-filled swamp, nature is clearly thriving inside the Woodfall Temple. This is weird because even inside the temple, there are poison pools covering its interior. The only explanation for this phenomenon is that the entirety of the Woodfall Temple is made out of compost and fertilizer. This allows the plants to thrive and counteract the poison's effects. On the transition of night to day or day to night, the Venus flypads transition from a deadly form to a more flower-like appearance. Well, many have believed this was because of the day-night transition, but this is actually because the Venus flypads have an internal clock that transforms them every 12 hours. The Manic member of Donjoro's Frog Choir boss fight is one of the most beloved mini-bosses in the entire game. Many believe Majora put a curse on this member of the choir to cause this dramatic change in character. However, the reasoning for his behavior is due to an overindulgence in the poisoned water. This water, in addition to mutating frogs, also has hallucinogenic properties that cause the user to wildly lash out against those around them and also tame the first turtle they see. Uldola, with his rhythmic chants and unique fighting style, differentiate him from any other boss from the temples. As one of the only humanoid bosses inside of Majora's Mask, his fight is one of the best sword fights we can experience in the game. However, if we look closely, we can see a trail that follows Uldola anywhere he goes. This trail, while as weird as it may be, can only be one thing: odor. Due to the fact Uldola has never left this temple since its inception, he has gained a musk that causes him to leave a trail everywhere he goes, leaving anyone trapped in it doomed to perish. As we leave the Woodfall Temple, we stumble upon the Deku Princess, which we were sent here to save by our monkey companion. This iconic moment culminates by putting the Deku Princess in a bottle, and while we all see this happen, no one ever mentions the implications. This event solidifies in canon the Deku race's power to shrink in size, thus meaning that Deku Link has untapped potential sadly never explored in-game. With the southern swamp behind us, we make our way to the peaks of Termina. After unfreezing an exhibitionist's furnace and stopping a Goron child from vocally assaulting the Goron people, we make it to Snowhead Temple. With its immense verticality and frozen doors, today I'm going to show you what you couldn't have missed in Snowhead Temple. The Snowfall Temple instantly bombards us with some very interesting scenery, with spires of ice to our left and to our right. While many will just leave it at that, if we take a closer look at the way these spires took shape, it seems to be modeled after a ribcage. And the only creature with a ribcage that we know of that has ventured into Snowhead recently was Darmani. This must mean that Darmani, when he perished in Snowhead, his bones became the blueprint for these ominous spires. In the main sanctum and a few other rooms, we come across what seems to be lava pools, melting the layers of ice that has compacted around it. This lava indicates that Snowhead rests on top of an active volcano. This also explains why we have many geothermal hotspots in the Snowhead region, mainly seen in its hot springs. We can also see in the main sanctum the amazing feats that Link is able to pull off with Darmani's power. With a quick estimate of how heavy ice is compared to the volume of the block, we can assume that Darmani's punch has the force to move give or take 34,523 pounds or 15,659 kilograms of ice. This means that if Link had more than 3 days to master Darmani's full power and gained a better technique, he could definitely obliterate any enemy in one punch. The Wizrobe we see in Snowhead Temple has clearly gone insane. The reason for this insanity though is from his younger years when he was trained in ice magic from Kotake. Even though his training went smoothly, he slowly went insane due to him not having Gerudo blood to control this power, which has left him in this sorry and hostile state. The Goat boss fight is one of the most iconic fights inside Majora's Mask. With its speed-oriented gameplay, it is a very fun and interesting fight. However, with how loved it is, its predecessor is never covered as much as it should be. Of course, I am referencing the Big Octo mini-boss fight in Jabu Jabu's belly. Both fights depend on a circle arena to keep its identity, and it's great to see this callback in Majora's Mask. After we destroyed Goat at Snowhead, we feel an urge to go to the sea and help the Zoras. This urge quickly subsides, however, as a greater purpose calls us to action: killing spiders. As we head into the spider houses with their unique designs and weird puzzles, I'm going to show you what you couldn't have missed. In the Southern Swamp Spider House's main sanctum, we come across a pillar surrounded by water. At the base of the pillar, there's a sign that is written by the Swamp Tourist Center. This sign says to take some fresh spring water home with you. This is extremely odd considering there's no housing for Link in the entire game, bar the Stockpot Inn. This must mean that player housing, specifically in the Southern Swamp, was planned but was removed late into development. In the deepest chamber, we find a very lush room filled with Skulltulas and bugs galore. What strikes many players as they enter this room is how the plants, particularly the bushes, are extremely well trimmed. This indicates a being with a higher than normal intelligence that has been gardening inside this room. And the only creature that could likely qualify are the Skulltulas, which it seems we interrupt mid-bush trimming session by brutally slaying them and taking their soul. The bug holes that are required to find some of the final Skulltulas are very interesting, mainly because they demonstrate how Skulltulas are lower in the food chain than the common variety bugs we see in Majora's Mask. This is why when bugs enter the hole, the Skulltulas run in fear, which also explains why the Skulltulas were all hiding from the bugs in the tree and the lush room mentioned prior. After clearing the Swamp Spider House from their infestation, we move to the Ocean Spider House to do what anyone would do, and kill some spiders. Oddly enough, the only big Skulltula we see in the spider houses is this one in this specific room. This implies that this big Skulltula was actually the Queen Skulltula, and because we end her reign inside this house, she will never be able to spread her influence to another spider house in the future. Inside the dining room of the Oceanside Spider House, we see 4 stall children, all in some sort of trance. If spoken to, they will reveal that they are on a mission. However, with them being stuck in a complete trance unless spoken to, this must mean that sitting at this dining room table causes you to dissociate completely unless snapped out of it. One can only think of how many last meals were had here only for their participants to die due to hunger after being stuck in a trance. And as we leave the spider house, we get left with one last disturbance. The man who greets us after our excursion says that he will now be taking all of our hard work in exchange for a measly cloth bundle. While we accept, we can only imagine what horrors he will experience due to bad karma for not immersing us in full. After finishing up our cleaning duties at the spider houses, we remember that we learned of a Zora who lost her eggs. With our new purpose found, we need to find them. But to do so, we have to venture deep into a fortress filled with well-trained and deadly pirates. The Pirate Fortress is one of the main stealth-oriented areas in Majora's Mask, and today, I'm going to show you what you couldn't have missed. As soon as we enter the fortress docks, we instantly see something confusing. A whole fleet of pirates are seemingly in a trance, boating in a circle. Many believe they are just patrolling, but in reality, they are actually just slacking off their pirating duties by having a race, and the only reason they even react to you is to get a pay raise. After we make it past the docks, we make our way to a room with a singular jail cell. This cell coincidentally has a piece of heart inside. But is it a coincidence? In reality, this cell was the home of one of the pirates' most notorious enemies, which was left here to rot. That is why when we go and pick up the heart, it is already decomposed and we only get a piece of it. After we clear out the throne room and finally start collecting Zora eggs, we weirdly enough find dangerous carnivorous enemies in each tank that holds an egg. This is weird, especially considering the pirates were told by Majora that the eggs were needed to get into the Great Bay Temple. This just shows how extremely negligent the pirates are when it comes to their policies, and if they are this negligent here, who knows what other things they are blissfully negligent to as well. Deeper in the fortress, we come across a room with too many barrels to count. While at first it looks understaffed, the fact that we have a pirate guard in the next room must mean that these barrels, in case of a break-in, would need immediate backup from one of the elites. This must mean that inside the barrels are Chateau Romani, which has slowly been stolen from the milk bar over the years. These barrels are surely cracked open every blue moon to celebrate the great heists and to keep morale high. The pirate guards we fight in the pirate fortress are very light on their feet and can dodge attacks easily. However, this skill, while elegant, can't compete with the sheer force of will Link has while slowly walking up and pressing B. After barely making it out of the pirate fortress in one piece, we return the eggs to the Marine Research Center. And after they hatch, we learn from the newborn Zoras a peak song. And after we play this melody to the mother, we can finally be on our way to the Great Bay Temple. With its unique design and loved mechanics, today I'm gonna tell you what you couldn't have missed. In the very first room of the temple, for a stray fairy chest to appear, we need to light 4 torches. After we do so, the chest quickly appears. But this leaves a question. How did lighting the torches cause a mechanism to activate the chest? The only explanation for this phenomenon is the turtle's fear of flames. When we light the torches, while not visible since it happens so fast, the great turtle flinches, accidentally hitting a button below the docks, causing the chest spawning magic to activate, allowing us to receive the stray fairy. The main gimmick in this dungeon is all focused around the flow of water. Depending on which valves we rotate, we can cause flow or cease flow. The biggest way this is shown is with the massive water wheel that controls the direction of the main sanctum's whirlpool. This mechanism is very unrealistic, especially considering the water that causes this rotation is pushing up on the wheel, fighting gravity and the friction of the wheel itself. Even if an adequate gearbox is set up between the water wheel axle and the massive whirlpool machine, due to gear ratios, this mechanism couldn't be turned unless the force the water generates is massive. The Wart mini-boss fight is a very surprising and unexpected encounter in the Great Bay Temple. After being spotted, Wart proceeds to be very passive to Link, not attacking but floating around the arena as these weird bubbles fly off to attack us. What seems to be happening is that Wart is floating around Link hoping that Link can remove the parasites that are causing him so much pain. After Link succeeds in this task, Wart starts dancing for joy in the room, but due to his size poses a danger for Link, causing Link to kill this innocent creature for his own safety. And as we go deeper into the temple, we find another manic member of Don Giro's Frog Choir. This member, while not under the influence of poison water like the member at Woodfall, is sadly in a situation similar to Wart, though his predicament is worse. Due to his small size, the parasite has seized control of his nervous system, and only after you attack him is he able to snap out of it and revert to his non-manic state. Due to the heavy use of a factory aesthetic in the Great Bay Temple, many have theorized that this temple used to manufacture many valuable goods in its depths. While we don't know the specifics, many believe it was a liquid that was manufactured here, and even if we don't know what liquid that was, whether it was a beverage or maybe even oil, it had a demand that warranted a factory of this size. As we make it to the final chamber of the Great Bay Temple, we stumble upon Georg, a massive flounder primed and ready to attack. What's interesting about Georg is that she's a fish. After resetting time at an undisclosed part of Majora's Mask, we have a weird urge to scour Clocktown to uncover the mystery of the purple guy. So here's what you couldn't have missed in Kafei's quest. The first step in reuniting this happy family is talking to Anju on the dawn of the first day, after she receives Kafei's letter. However, the reason she asks us to meet her in the kitchen is because she doesn't want the hand in the toilet to hear her plea, because he has offered his help to Anju before, and it was kind of awkward. After depositing the letter Anju gave us, we must wait till morning to speak to Kafei, but the fact it takes so long for the letter to be sent in a town as small as Clocktown shows that clearly modern shipping methods seen in companies like Amazon have not been adopted in Clocktown. After we meet with Kafei to learn of his curse and his reasoning for going into hiding, questions still remain about why Kafei was cursed in this way specifically. The reasoning is clearly because Skull Kid has a hatred against tall kings and forcefully turned Kafei into a short king. This is to help him understand the struggles that short kings go through daily. We learn of the negotiational prowess the owner of the Curiosity Shop has when he commits clear as day highway robbery on Sakon. And while Sakon clearly deserves it, we can only wonder where the Curiosity Shop owner learned to be so cold and calculating when it comes to negotiations. After meeting up with Kafei and making it inside the hideout, we come upon the most douchey hideout the world has ever seen. Sakon is not only showing off his treasure, but on the off chance you want to steal it, he set up an entire extremely impractical countermeasure to where the treasure will fall into a secondary basement hideout for him to escape with. And while at first this makes no sense at all, if you think about Sakon and his ties to the black market, clearly Link and Kafei were being recorded, and this whole section was an underground game show Sakon will sell to other criminals to make more money than the Sun Mask was ever worth. And finally, after all loose ends are tied up, we get to see the beautiful reunion between Kafei and Anju. where they trade their masks with us as a witness to their commitment. This scene's extremely heartwarming and is furthered at the end credits when we see Anju walking down the aisle at last. However, no matter how heartwarming this whole situation is, Anju and Kafei are very inconsiderate considering the man who made this all possible, the postman, wasn't invited to their wedding. With Gyor filleted, it's time to head to the Ikanas, and after bartering with some Gibdos, we manage to get the mirror shield, which conveniently leads us to the courtyard of Ikana Castle. Ikana Castle is a lot of things, but today I'm going to tell you what you couldn't have missed. As soon as we enter the courtyard, we see these parts of the ground that seem to be dug out as a moat, and however convincing that may be, it's not the truth. If this was a moat, it wouldn't make sense for it to be so thin, because anyone could easily just step over it. These dugout portions are actually a bug highway. This highway was dug out to appease the bugs and prevent their wrath from ever falling on the Ikana Kingdom. As we enter the front doors of the castle, we enter upon a group of redeads that we can only presume used to be civilians of the Ikana Kingdom. What is interesting about these assumed prior civilians is that when we slay them, they dropped mounds of rupees. This must mean our prior civilians were actually nobles of the Ikana Kingdom that were trying to have an audience with the king right before the destruction of the Ikana Kingdom. After we take a right from the main sanctum of Ikana Castle, we run into another one of those sunblocks. These blocks clearly were not intended to be here, so the only question is, who put them here and why? These blocks can just be attributed to Majora, but I believe that we need to think a little wider for this mystery to be solved. The only characters who could have any reason to do this would be the Gorman brothers, since we know of their affiliation with the Garos and the history between the Garos and the Ikanas. They must have put these blocks here to seal away Ikanan history and hope that the wrongdoings of the Garos fade into obscurity. The roof of Ikana Castle seems to have a recently patched hole, which is surprisingly sturdy. Clearly this was done to not allow the sun block to be removed in the entrance. But who could have patched a hole so well that not a bomb, but a Goron keg is required to destroy it? The only explanation is that the master craftsman is also affiliated with the Garo and used all his intellect and engineering knowledge to patch this hole right. Aigos Ikana is one of the coolest looking bosses in Majora's Mask, and really steals the show when you think of Ikana Castle as a whole. However, one thing that is confusing is that when we shoot our arrows to burn away the curtains, Aigos seems very confused at the sight, even putting his hands on his head in surprise. This must mean that the Ikana Kingdom lived in an age before fire existed, and this is their first time seeing anything like it. This would also explain the need for skylights in this room in the first place, and the lack of torches in the entirety of the castle. After giving Aigos Ikana the revelation of fire and losing some weight by playing an elegy, we make it to the Stone Tower Temple. This temple is the best and worst flipping dungeon in Majora's Mask, and today I'm going to show you what you couldn't have missed. As we enter the first sanctum, one thought crosses our minds. Why was this temple built on a tower? Some may draw comparisons to the Tower of Babel or when Icarus flew too close to the sun, but I believe the reasoning is much more baffling. If we look closely at the front of the temple, we can tell that it resembles a head. And while many will write this off as just a cool design, I have come to tell you that the Stone Tower Temple is a great and mighty creature akin to Jabu Jabu. And as the story goes, this creature was imprisoned by being encased within the stone tower due to its violent acts against the Ikana people. Long has passed since then, so long the creature petrified and eventually was hollowed out by architects to create the Stone Tower Temple. If we look around the Stone Tower Temple, we see this one specific sigil that is repeated amongst the walls of the temple. These symbols are decently cryptic, but if we look a little closer, it looks like a platform with 4 objects surrounding it. And after staring at the sigil for a few hours, I deciphered what this image is as a whole. If we look closely, the 4 objects were horns surrounding the stage. And what is on this stage to require this entourage, you ask? Well, what it seems to be is a rock, which was clearly very sacred to the inhabitants of the Stone Tower Temple, which also explains why we see so many sculptures of this rock all around Termina. Once we get deeper inside the Stone Tower Temple, we come upon a room with many mirrors, and while gameplay-wise they allow us to clear away the sunblocks, there are actually more reasons to why they are here. These mirrors are actually foreshadowing to how the temple mirrors itself after the light arrows are obtained. After we flip the temple, many changes are now observed right off the bat. One of the main differences we see in the temple is the lack of water in all of the sections that used to contain it. We clearly are able to see where it drained out of the temple from, but The aftermath is never seen. On the dawn of the second new day, this water sadly crashes directly onto Clocktown, causing immense flooding and destruction. While no one in Clocktown dies, the economy surely will take years to recover. As we near the boss key, we are stopped in our tracks by Gomez. Not much is known about this enemy other than its form and its clear parallels to the Grim Reaper from its French name, Foucher, which literally means Reaper. However, if we take the prefix from its English name, Gomez, it clearly has some relation to Goma, especially with that shared prefix. This means that Gomez is Goma's fifth cousin twice removed. And finally, as we enter Twinmold's boss room, clearly something isn't right. As we enter the room, it seems to be a desert. This is odd, especially considering Twinmold is a worm, and worms are known for increasing the nitrogen content in soil and keeping it healthy. This must mean that Twinmold is actually an anti-worm and acting as a parasite to the soil, which furthers our purpose in slaying him so we can save this desert and turn it back into an oasis. After defeating Aldoa, Goat, Georg, and Twinmold, all giants have been freed. We ascend the clock tower to stop the moon, but clearly Majora isn't one to go down, or I guess up in this case, easy. With our ascension to the moon imminent, I might as well tell y'all what you couldn't have missed inside the moon. As we enter the moon, we instantly are bombarded with a scene that is unlike any other in Majora's Mask. While most know the metaphor of the boss mask children playing being the giants, and the Majora child in the center being the Skull Kid, but a theory many don't know is that the tree behind the Skull Kid represents his pain for the giants leaving him, and how it grew and started to branch out to hurt more people than just himself. However, that is just a theory, and clearly the tree actually represents the Skull Kid's original victim, the butler's son. The Deku Trial is known for being one of the shortest trials we endure inside the moon, with a very quick platforming section revolving around the Deku Flower mechanic. However, the reason this section is so short is actually very malicious. This section being short is sadly a form of height shaming against Deku Link, as he is the shortest of all of Link's transformations. The Goron trial delves into a weird place, with us utilizing the bouncy nature of the Goron roll so we can make precise jumps. However, the fact that Gorons are able to perfectly bounce off chests without losing speed shows that the chests in Majora's Mask perfectly obey Hooke's law, which is a function that can calculate the force given back after compressing an elastic surface over a distance. The Zora trial has us swimming through pipes in an attempt to find the Georg masked child who is playing hide and seek. This trial is usually seen as a metaphor for Lulu the Zora, who frantically sent out Macau to find her eggs, which is very similar to this game of hide and seek. However, if you think back to the Great Bay, this game of hide and seek is a callback to how the Beaver brothers hid themselves far off at the top of a waterfall to protect their treasure, a bottle, from those who would steal it. The Link trial involves a gauntlet of enemies while also throwing in a few puzzles along the way. Overall, this trial is an amazing way to test Link's abilities. Many believe the series of very small and claustrophobic rooms are referencing how Link has been stuck in a relatively small 3-day time loop for on average about a month's worth of time. However, the claustrophobic intent is actually supposed to be a reference to how Link feels when he awakens each Great Fairy, with their immense size filling up more than 90% of his field of vision. With the Majora boss fight, it's pretty clear that the 3-phase fight is referencing the 3-day cycle we have been stuck in. However, one running theory is that in a similar fashion to how Majora slowly turns into more and more of a monstrosity, an almost mirrored situation happened with Skull Kid, by his mischief originally just being simple pranks on the inhabitants of Clocktown, to now causing severe damage to many civilizations and Termina. Though as usual, this is just a theory, and this phase change is probably a reference to how the game series after this point would take 3 steps in art style, from cartoony to realism, and then a mix of the two. And that is the end of what you couldn't have missed in The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. If you enjoyed, as usual, you know what to do.